Hello, everyone. Today, Saber and I will be taking you through the February patch, introducing over 60 buffs and nerfs to the game. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that would really help us out if you guys would like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. So, Saber, you ready to get started?
Definitely, I'm super excited to go through all the changes.
Me too. This is awesome. All right, so what do we got first here?
So, Aguara got a small buff here, just provision changed from 9 to 8, which should just make, like, this is a card that's like, it's pretty, always been like pretty okay, but just not quite good enough, and I think this small buff could maybe make it playable.
Yeah, it's pretty nice little buff. Doesn't seem super impactful. This is sort of representing a trend of what we're going to see in these changes, right?
Yes.
Moving forward, like a lot of the locks seem to have gotten buffs across the board.
Yes, it seems like all factions will actually have some playable lock cards now, which is going to be very interesting. But let's get back to that later. So, next up, we have two buffs to different bomb cards. What do you
Mm,
think about these changes, Goflo?
I think Matic is gonna love them.
Yes, I definitely
Precision strike.
I agree. Like Madak was already pretty decent, but now you actually have gonna get some very decent four provision bombs. We have
Mhm.
Dancing Star that's now gonna be four provision. Dancing Star has the Valley Boy effect, so you damage three, then two, then one if you kill something
Yeah.
each time. Six for four if you can get the condition off, and D-bomb just becomes a four damage removal for four provision. I think that's very decent.
Oh. Oh wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, for some reason I was thinking that this was two 5Ps down to 4Ps, but it's a 5P down to a 4P, and then a 4P's damage goes up from 3 to 4. So definitely much better value and much better provision-wise for those decks.
Yeah, especially since Madak was already decent, so I could definitely see that the card being pushed towards one of the top tier decks next patch.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of relied on Precision Strike Matic to climb this season, so if it was already my number one go-to
Yeah,
Squirtle deck, this is kind of
kind of scary.
well, yeah, a little scary.
All right, next up we have Dark Array. And as we talked about with Aguara, then this is just another case where we have a buff one of these gold lock cards. Dark Array goes from being 7 provision to 6 provision, and power change from 5 to 6. So it's a double buff again, both cheaper and stronger.
Mhm.
How would you rate
Yeah.
this card compared to Aguara that we just saw?
Well, let's see. Agora was ended up at 8 provisions for a 7 power card
Yeah.
that can either lock or remove a lock. And then instead of that, we're now having a what is ending up being a 6 for 6 that
Hmm.
can only lock.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Torgray is, I guess, better power for his provisions, but he lacks the flexibility. I guess it all depends on how often you'll be needing to remove locks in the meta, right?
Yeah, I was also thinking, like, just like you talked about in your Root of 16 video, then Aguara is like higher provision, so it's better in terms of polarization. Having these 6P cards can be a little bit difficult to fit as one of the cards you actually want to play. So for that reason, I could actually see Aguara being one of the better locks in the game, whereas Darkrai might just end up in a little bit of an awkward spot in terms of provision.
Yeah, 6P definitely being the awkward provision slot.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
All right, next up, this card is very interesting. I remember this being revealed, and like everyone was like, "Oh, is this strong or is it bad?" And no one really knew, and then it
Mhm.
just hasn't seen any play. Um,
Yeah.
do you think this 1 point provision buff will make any difference in that regard?
I don't know. Like, I mean, let's see. You're getting 6 points for 5 provisions, and then you get to look at your entire deck from top to bottom, and you can put a card on the bottom of your deck. Now, I don't think I can't think of anything that synergizes with putting a card on the bottom of your deck.
Remember that it also shuffles the deck if you do that.
Yeah, and if you don't do that and you know the order, um, I don't know. Like I could see that being nice, knowing the order of your deck, but I'm trying to see where it's going to be winning me games,
Yeah, so it seems like it's
not
like
seeing it.
Yeah, it's a card that doesn't really synergize too much with anything right now, but at the same time, it's also a card that's like pretty decent value, 6 for 5, and like a pretty cool effect. I feel like if this was 4p, you would always run it. Like compared, like this, just as like a 4p
Oh,
filler, you would definitely put it in, right? But 5p is still like a little
yeah.
bit, maybe like, is it worth the provision, or is it just something that's like gonna look a little bit fun and then don't actually end up
Yeah.
doing much?
No, so if we were to imagine we put it at 4p, right? Then it would end up being like a Noon Wraith, but with
Yeah,
no downside.
exactly.
So that's too much, right? But then again, five provisions we think is it's not really worth playing. I feel it's kind of not worth playing still. I think what really needs to be reworked is sort of the ability to something maybe like a little bit more useful. Um, putting a card on the top of your deck obviously would be probably pretty OP,
Hmm.
but maybe it was something somewhere in between the two. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not sure. It's a strange card.
Yeah, true. All right, next one, the villain. The villain got a provision change from 8 to 6, so that's like a massive buff as well. Now this is, I mean, it goes into this awkward provision slot of 6 provision, but I mean, 5 power, move 3 units, isn't that quite powerful?
uh, yeah. So yeah, it's a ends up being 5 points for 6 provisions and move 3 units. Hmm. I mean, there's definitely a synergy to be found with Dolblathana sentries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you can get 3 points for each one that you have on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, yeah, I could see this maybe being included in movement decks
It seems like
going
kind of
forward.
flexible. You could also run a little bit with Dragon Stream, of course, like you used to do.
Hmm.
So quite a few cards you could play this with. It is probably one of the best gold movement cards in the game. But
Yeah.
question is if it will be good enough.
Mm. Yeah, I think that one I'm a lot more unsure on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 5 for 6. So let's see. It plays for 5 points. If you have a sentry, it plays for 8 points for
Yeah,
6 provisions. And if you do 2 sentries, it plays for 11 points for 6 provisions. I mean, that starts to scale pretty well. Like you said with Dragon's Dream, all of a sudden you get pretty much 9 more points
yeah,
if you play it with Dragon's Dream. So you're getting 14 for 6. Like that's pretty good.
yeah. Maybe not a card that we'll see play right away, but it's a card that maybe could find its way into the meta at some point.
Hmm.
So next I've got another bomb here, Red Haze. The ability didn't change, but the provision just got changed from 5 to 4. Will this card be played now in Magic decks?
I like this a lot. Um, Red Haze always felt like one of those cards, almost like Predatory Dive, where
Mm-hmm.
it's either going to find great value or it's going to find terrible value, but no in between. And it's sort of a card that you don't really want to be as part of your main game plan, like up in the 5Ps,
Mm.
but as a 4P tech, I feel like that's really cool. And again, this is like a big buff to Precision Strike Matic decks, right?
Yeah.
Uh, this is going to see a lot more play, I think, definitely as like a one-off, especially in control decks. What do you think?
I agree. This isn't really the card you would just throw in a single copy of. Two of them might be too much, but just something that the opponent has to play around at all times. Pretty annoying for the opponent, I think.
Yeah. Hmm. Definitely agree. And if you have two of them in your deck, you manage to get one off. You're never going to get a second one off, right? Like they're always
Probably
going to play
not.
around it from then on. So
Yeah, I agree. All right, then we got two buffs here, and these buffs are rather small, I think. Neither of these cards were particularly good before. Regis power goes from 2 to 3. Scorch provision changes from 12 to 11. Personally, I don't think these cards will see any play. What do you think?
this is sort of like the retroactive apologetic initiative killed these cards. Let's make them a little bit better
Yeah.
kind of thing. Eh, uh, I don't know if people would play these cards if they were 2 point buffed. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Scorch, but the initiative really hurt the power of these two cards, and we're gonna end up with an 11 point. What Scorch is basically, it's imagine Curse of
Yeah.
Corruption, but it's 11 points, and it has an initiative where it can get extra value. Like I don't know. What do
No,
you
I,
think?
I agree. I think Scorch would have to be 10 provision to be considered. At 11, it's still just too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Regis probably this like
Should probably be like 4 points at least. Probably also a few less provisions. Like it's just so
yeah.
bad with initiative, I think.
13 provisions is a lot of
Yeah,
provisions for a card like this, which is now with initiative so hard to set up.
yeah, I agree. All right, then we got Veda Mega, and Veda Mega is also getting one of these double buffs. So power change from 5 to 6, provision transfers from 7 to 6. So it's a 6 for 6 now, and you can, I guess the main purpose of this card is to increase all row effect durations by 1.
Yes.
So usually row effects, they deal what? Like if it's just a normal like fog or something like that, it's like 2 points. If it's Ragnarok, it's 3 points. So 6 for 6, they can play for like +2, +3 points, something like that.
Yes. Okay. So I don't think this card is you're gonna see a ton of play in like a wide variety of decks. I have a sneaking suspicion that this card will see play in a certain deck though, but it's because of a buff to another card. But we haven't gotten to that one yet, so I don't know if I should say it.
Okay, let's just keep the suspense and then get back to that in a bit.
Okay.
So next up, we got a huge rework here, and well, I mean, I guess it's most of it is just developer comment, but for the most part, the change to this card is that instead of just being able to banish 3 cards like you used to, then now it's only 6 provision, but then it's an order ability. So like you play it, you can banish 1 card, 6 for 6, just like Squirrel, and then each turn you can continue banishing. What do you think? Will this card see play in any deck?
Well, it's the very first banish engine. We've never had a banish engine before. I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, could we see a synergy between this and Viper, maybe? Helping the Viper to pop out earlier?
I was thinking about that as well. Viper got a buff itself. We will get back to that in a bit. So maybe those 2 cards together. I still think like 6 for 6, it's just like probably just would rather run a Squirrel, but maybe in specific metas this could be good.
Yeah, again, and circling back to what we were talking about earlier, 6 provisions is definitely that kind of awkward provision range, so it kind of already makes it a little bit shaky in terms of includability.
I agree.
Yeah, I think this is one we'll have to wait and see, right?
For sure. All right. Next up, we got 2 buffs to Yennefer. And Yennefer of Wengenberg, that card changes from provision 11 to 10, so just a little bit cheaper to include in your deck. And Yennefer Conqueror gains Seal and gains 1 provision buff as well.
Yeah. That seems really good for Conjurer, though. Not only the 1 provision buff, but sort of like guaranteed value with the right setup. Like, I don't know. Still memey, but
I tend to agree. Like, I think so. For the first yen, it's probably still only going to be used in some specific swarm decks, and they'll probably be happy they got 1 extra provision to play with. I don't think that's a massive change in any way, though. This other card, Conqueror, could see some play in some engine heavy decks that has a way to protect cards. I mean, playing for like at least 1 point a turn, potentially 0 points a turn, and having Seal just increases the floor of the card, which is very important with these expensive engines. So
exactly,
I think it's could be played. Maybe not like top tier, but I could definitely see it making its way into some decks.
Right? Yeah, I think so too. That's like the provision buff is nice, but the Zeal means, like you said, the floor is gonna be higher. I mean, you can just think of like, all you need is like a couple 4s or something on the board, and you could probably get like 3 or 4 points a turn you play it, and it already plays for provisions, and then it's just like bonus value after that. In the right deck, I think it could be quite good.
I agree. That was it for the neutrals. So let's move on to monsters here. And for monsters, the first change, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be really, really happy about this change, or at least what the change is going to achieve. Personally, I'm not super happy about how they're doing it, but I'm happy about what it's achieving. So, first of all, Overwhelming Hunger loses 1 charge, goes from 3 to 2 charges. They get another provision to compensate for it, and they buff Ikimara. So, in terms of value from the leader, now you have 2 3 points Ikimara instead of having 3 2 points Ikimara. So, in terms of points value from the leader, it's the same. 1 more provision, but obviously 1 less consume. Furthermore, Vi got 2 provisions more expensive and lost 1 power. So, what do you think of the score flow?
I
Well,
think we've
this,
got some math to do.
yeah,
uh, well, all right. I like the Ekimara change to from 2 to 3. I think that's kind of cool. It's going to help out some other cards which spawn Ekimaras.
mm-hmm.
Um, V. So let's see. We have 2 provisions off of V, and then power changed from 8 to 7. If you look at it, I think what in an average V game, you maybe consume V, I want to say like around 7 times. Does that sound in the right ballpark?
I would have said 6, but something like that
6.
sounds reasonable.
6 or 7 times. Okay. So you basically end up losing 1 point on your, if we consume it 6 or 7 times
Mm-hmm.
and play 7 to 8 Vs, you lose 1 point on your 7 to 8 Vs. So it's 7 to 8 points nerf to the card, and then 2 points to the provision. So we could say like approaching about a 10 point/provision nerf to the card overall.
Yeah,
Does that sound about right? Yeah, that's a pretty big nerf, right?
it's a big nerf, and I think honestly one of the biggest nerf is the hunger change, right? Because hunger now can only consume twice, which usually means you can cycle your Vi 1 less time. So if you're removing the last Vi, that's like a 25 or 30 point play you're losing. So I think Vi will completely disappear from the meta. I think this card is going to be really bad now.
It's dead.
Yeah,
It's never coming back. It's over.
Rest in peace, Vi. The one thing I don't like is that I think Ulming Hunger was a fine leader before it was a solid leader. You had some nice uses with Manticore and Deadlaugh and Maruna. And that archetype kind of seems to suffer a lot from this change as well. I feel like you could have maybe just nerfed Vi and then kept Hunger like it was, and I think that would have been better in my opinion. But this is how they choose to do it. I'm just happy that Vi won't be particularly good anymore.
Agreed. And yeah, I could definitely see where you're coming from, because before Vi or V or however you want to say it, overwhelming hunger was definitely, it was the meta. It was strong, but it wasn't overbearing. And now I'm a bit worried. It like you said, it's gonna kind of disappear,
Mm-hmm.
not having enough support for its Death Wish units.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
Okay.
And then we got a few more buffs to some of these, Deathwish bronze monsters cards. So first we have the Harpy. The Harpy is the token that the Harpy egg spawns. So the Harpy egg is 3 points, 5 provision, and then if you consume it, then you get the Harpy out, which now will be 6 points. So technically that card, if you consume it, will be worth 9 for 5. The Bridge Troll will be 4 provision now. So if you consume it, it'll be 8 for 4. Do you think this will be enough to make these cards playable again?
An 8 for 4. It kind of brings the Bridge Troll on par with the Rot Fiend, right? Which is also technically an 8 for 4, but except it has control.
Is Rot Fiend 5 provision? Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, is Rot Fiend 5? No, oh yeah, I think you're right. Rot Fiend is 5. So in that case, no, it's not really similar to that. I guess an 8 for 4 is kind of nice. But then again, we're also looking at a Death Wish that has 1 less consume every game due to the leader nerf.
Yeah, so
I'm hesitant to say anything about any kind of Death Wish cards being playable after that leader nerf, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. It depends if like the consuming cards will be good enough, and they're usually just playing for a 1-to-1 point to provision ratio. So if you combine, let's say you play like a 5 for 5 Harpy to consume it, and then so basically you're playing like 10 provision, and you're gaining 13 points, 14 points. So like it's okay, but it's not that great either. I'm not sure these cards will be top tier by any means.
Yeah, I think it's not bad, but
it's the right direction. I think we can agree.
Yeah, it's the right direction. Yeah, it's not like Bridge Troll was oppressive or something.
And no.
It, and it's like, what's going on? Bridge Troll is already so meta.
Yeah.
We could see Bridge Trolls being played now, maybe, which is nice, and same with Harpy Eggs. For
sure. Then we got IDR getting a buff from 8 to 7 provision. This is a card I have never seen played on ladder, I don't think.
No. I like to call it Ider. I don't know if that's correct or not.
You might be
I
right.
always assume, I assume that's how it was pronounced. But so to be honest, I'm not even very familiar with this card's ability, seeing as how little it's been played. But all right, so let's see. Order Adrenaline 3. Consume all tokens on this row and gain immunity whenever you consume one or more units. Spawn a drone in this row for 7 provisions and a 7 body. Hmm. Well, I mean, let's think about it. A 7 for 7? That's
Maybe it's
not
some
bad.
Thrive deck that also one consumes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I'm not very familiar with these sort of decks, to be honest. The card itself is
No.
decently statted, but I'm not sure if the support cards are there.
That's sort of the way I was. That's actually sort of what I was thinking. I couldn't quite put it into words, but I think you summed it up really well. The support cards are not there. Uh,
Mm.
Whenever you consume one or more units. See, that's unfortunate though, because its order abilities consume all 2 tokens on this row.
Hmm.
It would be kind of nice if it was like spawn a drone for every unit you consume, and then that order would play for like up to 8 points or something,
That
maybe.
would probably be really sick, right? If you could do that.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. I feel like people weren't playing this card not because it was overcosted, but kind of because it just sort of doesn't really synergize well with
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
upset, I think.
Then we got Katakan, and Katakan got a buff technically because, as you remember from before, Ikimara was buffed from 2 to 3 points. So when you play the Katakan, then immediately you only get a 5 point button now, but then you get a 3 point Katakan. So it still plays for 8 points on deploy.
Huh.
And if you manage to activate the Death Wish ability, then it's already 1 extra point. And usually you want lower Thrive cards because they're easier to activate. However, the card now plays into common removal tools like Boiling Oil, Rebuke, etc. So, what do you think? Is this card better or worse, or what do you think?
Definitely. I think it's definitely better.
Hmm.
Uh, Floor is the same. Ceiling is just increased. Um, Other than that, not really sure if it's gonna have too much of an impact. You know, this card hasn't really seen play at all since I think since Vampires was
Yeah.
popular, which was like I don't even remember when that was, what, 6 months ago or however long ago someone played Vampires like at a high competitive level. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that this card actually, well, this is good. This is a buff.
Hmm.
And I think this card might see play, but not just because of this. And again, this is because of another change, but we've not gotten into it yet, so I won't say anything
All right.
for now until we get there.
Teasing the audience.
I'm gonna circle back when we get there, and all these times I was like, I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm gonna refer back to them and be like, aha, this was what I was waiting for.
Great. Then we got a Fucker change. And Fucker is another card that I haven't seen played at all. Um, since it was, I think I maybe I saw it once, but that's about it. So, what is happening to this card? Well, it's losing its ability, and it's losing 1 armor. That sounds like a nerf, but it's now getting Thrive 2 instead. Now, I
Yeah.
think Thrive 2 is a lot more powerful than the old ability, right?
Um. Yeah. Well, this is the first Thrive 2 we've ever seen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It definitely sounds powerful, but something tells me that Thrive 2 could be potentially inherently anti-synergistic. The whole point of Thrive is that the lower the unit is, the more procs it's going to get. If it's thriving by 2 each time, it's going to climb out of reasonable range rather quickly. So I feel like Thrive 2 maybe isn't as great as it sounds, but I do think it is a buff over Thrive 1, to be clear.
Yes, it gets a little bit more tempo in short rounds, right? Or decks
Hmm.
that play, like a Vi deck, for instance, that just plays a bunch of road unions. But for most other monster decks, I also agree that in a long round, it won't actually like go much taller than would go anyway, maybe like 1 or 2 points. And if you compare this card to Lava, then I think like you would have to be pretty crazy to include Fucker over Lava in your deck.
Yeah. 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 Hmm.
All
I
right.
think I definitely agree. Mm-hmm.
And then we have two other changes here for monsters. And the Rod Fiend, as we talked about before, it is 5 provision, but now it's actually getting a point buff. So it's going to be a 5 for 5 with an additional 4 damage ability. And the Wild Hunt Hound is going to be 4 provision instead of 5.
Right. I feel like Wild Hunt Hound kind of needed to be Wild Hunt Hound kind of needed to be a 4P for a while now,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like it's basically one of your 3-point engines that buffs itself the turn it comes out, so it ends up being a 4 the turn you play it, right? Like we have so many of those already,
Mm-hmm.
and for 5 provisions, that wasn't great. Meanwhile, you've got in Nilfgaard, the card that buffs itself every time, every turn when there's a locked unit on the board.
Yeah.
Um, whose name
Master
currently
of
escapes me.
Disguise. Master of Disguise.
Master of Disguise. Thank you. Yeah, Master of Disguise. you know, Before the patch, Master of Disguise is a 4 power for 4P that buffs itself the turn it's played, and Wild Hunt Hound was a
Yeah.
5P that starts at 3. Like that's just kind of like 2 points worse than Master of
Mm-hmm.
Disguise and doing a similar kind of thing. This is a step in the right direction for Wild Hunt Hound. Brings it on par with most of those sort of
Yeah.
4P engines that buff 1 per turn.
And I genuinely think this card is better than something like Magni, because Magni's condition is more difficult to fulfill, I think, whereas this card, like having dominance on monsters, is usually not that difficult. So I think this card could be pretty solid. However, you probably want to start with like your Thrive cards first, like Lavas and stuff, so it will come down a little bit later, and maybe the opponent can try to deny it. But I think it's definitely going to see some play.
Yeah, definitely.
That was it for monsters. So let's move on to Skellige. Brockfire Hunter. Ability is now tied to range row.
Right.
What do you think of this?
Well, it doesn't really do anything. That's my
No.
first instinct.
Yeah.
Um,
The card.
I can go ahead.
The card was one of the stronger Skellige 4Ps. But so I guess they just wanted to give it a little bit of a nerf.
Yes.
But
exactly.
this nerf seems kind of random and pointless to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when this card was a 5P, and then they brought it back to 4. I was like, okay, that's good. That's a step in the right direction because no one played this card. And then it became, played a lot, and it's actually quite good, right? And maybe just removing the zeal or something, giving it like a 1 point smaller floor. Or I don't know. That might have been a better step. Keeping it at 4P but removing the zeal, similar to the Elven Swordmaster, right? That card doesn't have zeal. It's perfectly fine. The ranged row, I don't know. Like, I don't know why would we want a row restriction for Brockfire Hunter.
I agree. Next up, we got Jinkefred, another one of these luck cards that have been buffed. So instead of 6 power, it's now 7 power, 7 for 7. With a luck attached to it, if you have Bloodthirst. What do you think of this card?
I think it's very good. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's going to see some more play now. It's a very, very easy to meet Bloodthirst requirement. Almost any Skellige deck can meet that quite easily, even via the leader, if for most of them or some of them.
I'm just worried. Sorry for interrupting. I'm just worried there's some matchups like Kelly, for instance, where they start with Dash plus a leader charge, or Crystal Skull or whatever, and then you have this Jinkefred. I guess Crystal Skull blocks it anyway, but maybe there are some decks that will just play the most important engine first, and then you have to play some cards that deals damage first, and then you can play this. And not sure how. In a long round, sure, this will just play as a 7 for 7 lock, but I feel like in a lot of other situations, you'll actually have to wait a few turns to actually establish the Bloodthirst.
Sure. We could not only look at this as a buff to the card itself, but this is an indirect buff to Onslaught, which has been definitely not the most popular Skellige leader for a long time. It's probably the leader that this card synergizes with the most, because you can, like you were saying, you can't play it turn 1, but if you're playing Onslaught, you can play it turn 1 most of the time. If they play a unit and it's not buffed, you could damage it by 1 and lock it with Chang. the Bloodthirst 1 requirement
Yeah,
becomes almost, you know, it's barely even a
yeah,
problem at that point.
I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, then we have Giant Ball. Now, Giant Ball got a little bit of a rework here, or at least a change. So now the range ability, instead of only boosting self by the amount of enemy units that's damaged, then it can also target allies. And then it also got a provision buff. So I
Yes.
think there's like, I can't remember the name of the card, but in Skellige in the new expansion, they got this card that I think it's a mentor that boosts self by the number of damage units on the entire board, but it got adrenaline
Yeah.
attached to it. It kind of seems like this is pretty similar. I
This is
guess
interesting.
it just
There's
seems, yeah, it's pretty similar, right? Just as have the
well,
adrenaline restriction.
I mean, I was thinking that that the well the basically the Bear Witcher Mentor buffs by a wide amount of damaged units, whereas this card would buff by a single unit damaged by a lot, and that would require cards which can take a lot of damage. First two that come to mind are Jutta or Yutta, however you pronounce it,
Mm-hmm.
and Olaf.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I do think that maybe this card might see some play because it could be that one of the upcoming changes has to do with one of those cards I just mentioned. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let's take a look, shall we?
Yes, let's look.
Okay, let's maybe in a few cards. First off, yeah,
In a little
Kadoosh.
bit.
Um, and I love this change. So Kadoosh now only heals by 2 instead of 3 points. Kadoosh was one of the strongest cards of the new expansion. It was just like the value got from that card was so insane, and just reducing the heal from 3 to 2 is basically like a 2 point nerf to the card, and the card will still be solid. The card will still be played, but I just won't seem as overpowered as before.
Yeah, I think 14 for 8 with removal and
Mm-hmm.
easy to meet conditions is probably a little bit overtuned. Now we
Yeah,
have a 12 for 8 with removal and easy to meet conditions. Definitely well more within the realm of balanced,
yeah,
closer to balanced, I think.
probably still going to be very very strong, but a little bit more fair now.
Hmm.
Then we got Flaminica. Nice little buff to her. Usually, the difference between having 5 and 6 strengths on an engine is massive because there are so many of these bronze removal cards that deals 5 damage. So this getting a buff to 6 is pretty huge, I think.
Yes.
The question is, how many decks will this find value in? Um, but I think
Hmm.
that like there could be metas or decks where this would just be very solid. I think.
It could be. Well, I don't know. This is a strange thought, but like it kind of synergizes a little bit with armor up in a way. Heals
Mm-hmm.
all the
True.
wounded witchers, so it would basically play for 9 the turn it's played.
Mm-hmm.
But the downside to that is you have to play armor up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's
So
that? What's that like a 6 for 5?
it's uh it's
Deal.
it's a 5 for 5, isn't
Oh.
it?
Oh,
Deal
you.
2 damage and you spawn 3
Okay.
Witcher students that take 1 damage each. Yeah.
Yeah. Might
Yeah.
might need a little bit more support than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, even if you were to play cultists that damage your units, normally they're played on targeting armored units
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So, yeah.
Right. So now we have Heim, and this was one of the cards we talked about before. So one very strong combo you can have is Heim and Olaf. Now, Heim just got a small duration buff, making it a little bit more affordable to put in your deck.
Hmm.
And yeah, so basically the combo with Olaf is that you can ping Olaf once. You can only do that with what's it called? The series leader.
First side ritual.
Yes, ritual. So if you ping your only your Olaf for that and then go Heim on it, then Heim will boost self to the power of Olaf, and Olaf will almost double its power, right?
Right. Yeah. Uh, I mean, I think this is a great step in the right direction. I
Mhm.
think Heim has been unplayable for far too long. This is a card which back in beta was played very regularly, and of course had a completely different ability back then. But
Yeah,
the point is,
it's a cool card.
this card, yeah, it's a fun card. It's a cool card, and I like that it's now going to be a little bit more playable.
Hmm.
And I think it's nice when this card can work well with Olaf as a backup, but also sometimes on some occasions you could find really good value targeting your opponent's cards because it has that flexibility.
For sure. And if your Brock for Hunter sticks, and maybe you can like take the ping with Brock for Hunter and play a Hyman in the same turn, that could be very powerful.
Yes.
Next up, we got another nerf that I'm sure a lot of you guys will also like very much. So Lippy is getting a power reduction from 4 to 3 and a provision nerf from 10 to 11. This basically means that the buffs that Lippy got last patch with the buffs to Nickers and Roach will kind of be nullified because you're losing 1 power and provision. I think that's good. I think Lippy was overtuned, and this is not killing the card. The card can still the card is still okay. The deck won't die because of this, but it's just a small, but not insignificant nerf to the card, I think.
Yes, this definitely seems to me like maybe one of the most balanced changes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't kill the card like we're pretty sure V is dead, but Lippy definitely doesn't seem dead after this.
Mm.
It basically, like you said, it reverts it to uh pre-Way of the Witcher Lippy. However, still stronger than that because there's still Snowdrop, which is a great card for Lippy decks, and I think there's still a couple of other things. That means Lippy's it's not going to be as good as it was the past couple of months, but it's going to be a little bit better, I think, than it was before Way of the Witcher, which
Mm-hmm.
is nice. It's a nice middle ground.
For sure. And now the change we talked about before. Olaf is getting a huge buff from 8 to 10 provision. Now it plays as a 10 for 10, so already like 1-to-1 with its provision cost. And
Mm-hmm.
if you then consider the Heim as well, which also got buffed, then it's kind of like a double buff because Heim, if you use that on Olaf, will also go to 10 points if you use it. And Olaf would then go to 19, I believe.
Yes.
So you can play in a 9 for 7 and a 19 for 10 if that combo goes through. The only cost is you have to commit 1 leader charge. That seems
Yeah.
very, very strong.
Oh my gosh. 28 play for a total of 17 provisions.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really, really good. That's greater than the likes of Luisa Savola or, you know, Heron Kadooch, Bear Witcher. Like, this is a really big 2-card combo.
I guess to be fair, then you have to damage it first. It goes to 9, right? And then Heim will only go to 9 points, right? So,
Yeah, no, Heim would go to 9, and then Olaf would go to 19, so it's still 28-point play. Yeah,
right.
I think.
Right, yeah, I think you're right. But I guess only
Yeah.
so you have to use a leader charge as well, right? So that's like -1 point. I guess it's just a leader charge you're losing, basically, right?
It's just a leader charge off
Yeah,
first sign ritual. Yeah.
yeah,
Or you could set it up with like we were talking about the Brockvar Hunter,
yeah.
which can damage your own units. But that's if you use a Brockvar Hunter for it, it's -2 because you're taking a point you could have done to the opponent and doing it
Hmm.
to yourself instead. So I mean,
But still a very, very
maybe
strong
not really.
combo. I think probably the main issue with this combo is that first of all, Olaf goes really tall, and what happens if they heatwave Olaf when you play it, and you can only damage your own units, and you have a Heim that plays for 1 point, right? If you cannot damage anything on the opponent's side of the board.
Right.
So
Definitely disruptible if they have
yeah,
any kind of tall removal or I mean locks, right? Locks
Lux
would
as
also
well.
counter this.
So combo that's really easy to interrupt, but if it goes through, super powerful.